The ongoing battle for tech talent is a critical issue that we're all seeing as organizations are integrating more and more technology into their everyday operations. As the economic landscape has been changing, the competition for tech talent has become a defining factor in how companies are thinking about their operations. And as we're seeing technology in many different parts of the organization, those of you who might have been here in the morning heard us talking about this, used to be very isolated into the IT function, but now is throughout. And as a result, there's an increasing demand for technology skills and expertise across companies. In our research at Economist Impact, we looked at the technology imperative, and we found that 2/3 of business leaders reported that they have trouble attracting tech talent and also retaining it. The United States is estimated to lose about $150 billion each year as a result of tech talent shortages. And it's unclear whether current educational and training initiatives are doing enough to address these challenges. So what can be done? Our salon today will be examining these issues. We will start with a discussion of how business leaders can future-proof themselves for tech talent shortages. And then we will move to our panel discussion to discuss how enterprises can build ecosystems with government and academia and address these initiatives and challenges that we're seeing. Our salon today is the second that we've done today, and it's actually part of a multi-year series that we at Economist Impact have been doing with the Bahrain Economic Development Board called the Transformation Agenda. After our 2 salons today, we have 2 more in New York, and then the series will culminate with our flagship event called FinTech Forward, which will take place on October 2nd in Bahrain. You may have seen the QR codes on our signage. I would encourage all of you to scan those and learn more about the event and hopefully sign up to join us in Bahrain in October. So with that, I will welcome our speaker. Frederik Pferdt is the former Chief Innovation Evangelist for Google, and he's currently an adjunct professor at Stanford. Frederik, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Yes, it's a great pleasure to spend time with people who show interest in 3 T's: technology, talent, and transformation. I just made that up, but I think it works as a theme. Thank you. I truly believe that the future is not something that happens to us. It's something everyone creates. And I want to show you how I found people in the world who literally create the future every day. And I want to demonstrate to you what they have in terms of deep human qualities and skills and a mind state that allows them to build the future. But first, let me ask you a question when you think about the future. If you want to think about, sorry about that. Perfect. Let's do it a different way. If you want to complete that sentence, the future is, what word comes to mind first? The future is change. Uncertain, yes. Cool, yes. Progress. Innovation, yes. Infinite, fantastic, great. And everybody I ask has similar words, which is good, so fantastic. But if you put something different out there and say the future I create is, how many people in this room would actually use a different word? Great. So we see many people actually replace that word of uncertainty, change, innovation, cool. You probably keep that. But what we see is that if we put ourselves into the picture of the future, we have a different perception of it, which for me is fascinating. So I spent about 12 and a half years at Google as Google's Chief Innovation Evangelist. And in my first 18 months, I was on a journey to find out, how does Google innovate? What is the secret sauce that they come up with all these world-changing technologies? So I traveled to 27 offices, and I asked a lot of questions. Questions to people around, how do you innovate? What's your creative process? Do you have access to certain resources? Are you using a specific technology? How much time do you dedicate to innovate? All of those questions. And what I found by spending literally hours and hours, months and years with very bright people, that there is no specific creative process. It's not about access to specific resources, financial resources. It's not being in a very conducive environment to innovation. And also, everybody has just 24 hours in their day. But what I found is that when talking to, again, hundreds and hundreds of people, that all of them showed a specific quality, a quality on how to look into the future. And you see from some of these people that they were riding the wave of curiosity, what they said. They were playing the experimentation game. They were opting for open. They learned to be certain about uncertainty. They were getting good at not having all the answers. They were right-sizing risk, using all their superpowers, or were listening to themselves. So what I found is that it's about what I call a mind state that all of these people showed. And a mind state for me is the perception you have in any moment that determines how you experience the present. We are probably all familiar with the concept of my colleague Carol Dweck about a mindset. Mindset is something that is based on your beliefs, your attitude, and your past experiences. And we probably heard that many times in our lives, specifically in the corporate environment. If you need to change your mindset, right, it's pretty hard to do because it's focused on a long-term attitude that you've built over the years. So what I want to do is I want to use a mind state as a short-term, a dynamic lens that helps you to focus on the present moment. And that is something you can develop, you can change, and you can use to build the future. And a future-ready mind state is something that I have observed in all of those people, and I've trained about 30,000 people in the company. That is something that you can grow and develop, that you can use to literally build the future. And there is, for me, 5 dimensions that I want to share with you today. And I want to focus on 3 specifically, as some of my panelists probably will agree that these are probably the most important when it comes to building the future. Radical optimism, unreserved openness, compulsive curiosity, perpetual experimentation, and expansive empathy. And what I call your unique superpower, which is Dimension X. If all of those are at play, I always have seen that these are going to help you to innovate and build something remarkable. Now, the good news is that we all have them. They should be all familiar to you. You should be, to a certain degree, optimistic. You should probably show some openness from time to time about different opinions or ideas. You have your curiosity because you actually are born with it. We like to experiment and we show empathy. So all of those are basically deeply human qualities that we all have. So let me share 3 with you that I feel are probably most important when we look into the future of talent. Radical optimism. A radically optimistic person is not just seeing the glass half full, but is seeing the opportunity for better. That means that person sees the opportunity to fill the glass even further. Let me show you what I mean by that. If you want to make a frame just for a second by using your left hand and your right hand, so give it a try, and focus on one of those screens. You can choose the right one or the left one. Fantastic. So just that you have that very sharp in your focus. And just stretch out your arms so that you have that full in your frame. Just keep it up. So what most people do in a new situation is just do nothing. That's what your brain tells you all the time. Keep your hands up. I know it's a little bit of exercise, but probably after lunch it's good. So that's what our mind tells us in new situations, just do nothing. Or even worse, so keep that in your frame, it is impossible, right? That's the 2 things that our mind tells us all the time. But a radically optimistic person, someone like you in this room, will now reframe. So what you're going to do is you're going to zoom out and you're going to bring it closer to your eye to see the full picture here, which is, now it's not working. Usually what it comes up, I don't know why that's my fault, not the AV team's fault, so it's my fault, is nothing is impossible, right? Just do it. That will be the reframe from what we usually say to ourselves, right? Just do nothing, it is impossible. We move actually and reframe that into an opportunity. That's what is the power of radical optimism. The second thing that I want to show you is when we see people showing radically optimistic point of view and perception, they actually are not just able to look at a situation differently, but they are able to actually take others with them, to allow to view every situation as an opportunity. Like Isabel here, who I trained and coached during my times at Google. The second thing I want to share is about compulsive curiosity. Again, as I said, we are all born as curious individuals. But compulsive curiosity goes beyond, because it allows you to ask better questions. And asking questions is probably one of the last human domains that we have on this planet, as technology is providing all the answers for us at the moment. So asking better questions is helping us to lead others and lead teams to find better answers. Like my friend here, John, who said when he started his own company, he realized quickly that leading with curiosity was crucial, as his team's happiness depended on his own state of mind. So shifting towards asking questions and also empowering your team is something that we see the best leaders are actually doing. The last one I want to share is expansive empathy. And what I mean by that is not just understanding the needs of others, but understanding your own needs. Trying to empathize with yourself and trying to understand what do I need in every situation is a very powerful way to build the future. As Astrid here said, that ultimately empathy is the source of positive change. And the research is very clear. Empathy makes you not just a better parent, a better teacher, a better partner, a better politician, but it makes you a better human being. So with those 3 qualities of a future-ready mind state, being radically optimistic, compulsive curious, and have empathy, expansive empathy, I have found that you can literally build a better future right now. Because the question is not about what you want to be in the future, but for me the question is, how do you want to be in the future? What are some of these qualities that you want to show yourself? I have never had an answer to that question when I was asked, when I was this little, what do you want to become when you grow up? That's why I never asked that question to my children. But I ask them every day, how do you want to be in the future? Do you want to be more curious, more optimistic, more empathetic, more loving, or more kind? And I think if we find answers to that question, how we want to be in the future, I think we're going to also find the right talent who can help us to build a better future moving forward. So thanks for listening, and excited to dive into a conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, sit down. So that was fascinating. I love hearing about this. I've heard about it before, and I could listen to it all day. So we're all here to talk about tech talent shortages, as you and I have discussed. None of this was specifically about tech skills. So make the connection here. If someone in this room is worrying about what kind of tech talent they're going to attract, where do you take those steps in order to foster these skills, but also get the skills that you need?
Yes, great question. First of all, I think we should not mention that it's a battle for talent, right? I just not a big fan of battling. Instead of collaborating and learning from each other, and I think we had that conversation earlier as well, that it should be really something where we all share together, like how can we find and grow the best people in the world? And in order to do that, there's a couple of things you can do, right? First, I feel focusing on deeply human skills is probably a great way to start, as this is just a long-term view you can take. As we're focusing only on tech skills, right, these are very short-term, right? I don't think prompting is going to be a skill that we need probably in the next year, right? That will be replaced by something else. That's just my assumption, but I'm supported by a lot of people who think the same. So for me, it's really about finding these qualities of curiosity, right, of empathy, of optimism, but also people who like to experiment and are open to new ways of working and new ways of learning. And if you find those qualities in people, then trying to really build an environment where you can, foster creativity, foster innovation, and allow those skills to really thrive.
So how do we look for those things? How do you know when somebody has those qualities?
Yes, as I mentioned, the good news is that everybody is kind of like to a certain degree like optimistic or open or curious, right? But how many times do we end up in an environment where you're not allowed to ask questions, right, for example, or not to share that you don't have the answer, right, or admitting that something didn't go the right way, you made a mistake or you failed. And I think those are three examples where we really can build environments where this is allowed and this can happen. So it's less about finding those qualities in people, it's more that building the environment where these people with these specific, what I call dimensions of a future-ready mindset can actually thrive and be successful.
So you've said that you've trained tens of thousands of Googlers. What were some of the things that you did with them?
Yes, great question. Lots of experiments. I just love experimenting and trying things out. So me and my team, we focused really on three things, providing trainings around empathy, right, and how you can train that muscle of empathy. The second one about expansive thinking, right, coming up with really big ideas. And the last one is experimentation. And again, like these are things that you can train people in, you can help them to build those muscles. But most importantly, what we found through our experiments is that you need to provide an environment where, for example, experimentation is actually recognized and rewarded. So one of the examples that I like to use is that we've created an award for people who take risks. It's called the Penguin Award. We all know penguins, and I've learned that being on a entrepreneurship sailing to the end of the world, where I taught students at Stanford or from Stanford and Chile skill set around experimentation. So we watched penguins, and we saw that there's always one penguin that jumps first into the water, the courageous penguin, right? Having a 50% chance to find food or become food. And the rest of the colony stands back and waits patiently, right, if that penguin comes back up again. And we use that metaphor to really trying to encourage employees to also, jump into the cold water without knowing, right, what they will find. But that's the spirit of experimentation. You learn something. And we all also know what happens if nobody jumps from that ice shelf, right? The whole colony will basically disappear and die. And so in an organization, it's very important to reward people for taking risks and experimenting. So we handed out a little penguin every 2 weeks to the person who took a risk, and they shared what they've learned about a new technology, a new process, a new way of working, and so forth. And that's just one example of how you can encourage an environment or build an environment where risk-taking and experimentation is actually not just allowed, but it's celebrated.
You mentioned failure just now. I assume that's part of this. If you're going to take risks, sometimes they're not going to work out. How did you handle that with people who probably were accustomed to being very high achievers?
Yes. For me, failure is something that you can first reframe, right, as a learning, right? Use different language for failing, where somebody says like, hey, great, I've learned something, right? Instead of saying, hey, I failed, which is the first important step. I've worked with a pretty large sports organization. I don't want to say the name, but we've spent time together during lunch, and I still remember. And just give me a minute. The story, you'll love the story. So we spent time together, kind of like at lunch, and it was buffet style, and so people helped themselves and so forth, employees at that organization. And then one of the bowls fell down, right? Big mess, right? The leader of that organization immediately stepped forward and said, "It wasn't me." Pointed to someone more junior and said, like, it was her. And for me, that was such an important moment. I still get chills, because that is something where you don't build a culture of owning failure and trying to learn, because first, you're not role modeling, right? That you can own something and say like, hey, it was me, even if it wasn't you, right? But just owning that as a leader. And secondly, pointing to other people and saying like, maybe it's a more junior person who is responsible here for that mistake. So those two things, first, using different language around failure and turn it into learnings. Second one is be a role model, right? When something fails, owning it. And thirdly, not blaming others, right? When they make a mistake and putting them into the spotlight and say like, that person made a mistake. So I think there's three things that we can do and all learn to, again, shift that culture towards more experimentation. People like to take risks, and people like to learn.
Well, I would love to keep going, but I'm conscious of the time. And so thank you so much for being with us. And I will invite our panel to come up.
Fantastic.